What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to HBCU Pulse Radio. We're talking about the systemic inequities that go on with HBCUs and specifically what's going on at Tennessee State University. I have Tennessee State University's Alumni Association President, Charles Galbreath Jr. How you doing today, Charles?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm a fan of this platform. And so I just want to be just here and give you my all and just give you the Tennessee State University energy.
But yeah, man, let's go on and get into it. So what's going on, with Tennessee State? Because I know we saw the comments and heard the comments from Senator Todd Gardenshire.
Disservice to all the other universities on trying to recruit African-American students, minority students, because y'all have made such an aggressive promise to these students to come there that they're bypassing and get a same education. I mean, what I'm trying to figure out in my mind, all of a sudden 2,000 students out of the blue decided, no pun intended, because
out of the blue. Yeah, out of the blue.
Why did they TSU? Was it the aggressive marketing campaign, or was it because?
It wasn't the high standards of TSU, the quality education you're going to get at TSU. Yeah, the reputation.
But I want you really to break down for our audience what's going on with Tennessee State and the state of Tennessee.
Yeah. So again, Tennessee State University, amongst other things, we are going viral for a lot of reasons. So let me start with the good. We have an awesome band who just was nominated for a Grammy. So let me throw that out there for their album, The Urban Hymnal. But on the same day, around the same time, we go viral for a senator making some comments to our esteemed Dr. Glover. Those comments were questioning our enrollment numbers. We have had an increase in enrollment like many HBCUs around the country. And what we found is that Tennessee State University was held to the fire and really asked on this day how and why and when and where all of those questions came towards Tennessee State University. And so one of the statements that was made was, how did this happen? How did this happen out of the blue? How does it happen that these students, instead of going to other Tennessee schools, go to Tennessee State? And so, of course, our esteemed president kind of gave a chuckle and said, because of the quality education. And we were cheering because that is exactly what we feel. We've never questioned why anyone would go to Tennessee State University, but that's what happened during this hearing. And so that's what's kind of brought us here today. That's what's made us viral. And so I want to just share with you today just some other thoughts about how this can happen. And again, nothing happens out of the blue. And so we want to talk about how are some of the lead ups to our enrollment, what are some of the lead ups to comments and statements like this. And then there's something called land grant funding that I also want to mention. So that's where we are.
Land grants are near and dear to my heart because I went to a land grant university, Fort Valley State University, and I know that with us being land grants and state funded institutions, we often have these politicians that play with us.
Yeah.
So I want to get into what Senator Todd Gardenshire said, because I want to really highlight how these politicians and their lack of knowledge of what goes on in our institutions can be dangerous. So I want you to walk us through why what he said was dangerous and what can be the repercussions of his thoughts and actions towards the rising enrollment at Tennessee State.
Absolutely. So it's so important for us to remember that simple things that people say lead to mentalities. And when we're just in conversations, we can change our mentality, we can question mentality. But when those mentalities make their way into the mouths of our lawmakers, they become decisions that guide the future, decisions that can change a past. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are giving correct information to the lawmakers, that if they have questions, they have the right questions. Instead of wondering why students would choose Tennessee State University, we want them to ask, what can we do for the students who have chosen Tennessee State University? Again, we're a land grant university. What we found is that we are owed, and this is something that was put together by the state of Tennessee. There was a committee that was put together to audit how much we were owed as a land grant university. And that amount came out to $544 million, money that was owed to us over decades. And so when we think about the money that is owed to us, and we think about the statements of questioning why students will go to a university who has constantly been asked to do more with less, constantly been able to overperform yet being underfunded, it must be the excellence. It must be the education. It must be the history. It must be the protection and the confidence and the security that they feel when they go to Tennessee State University. So we love that Tennessee State University is a university of choice. That's where we are. It's a university where students want to go because of what it offers.
So I want to ask this, because this is something that when we talked about North Carolina A&T and the fact that they're being fined $2 million for, the rise in enrollment from out of state freshmen, because the whole entire reason that the North Carolina system, the University of North Carolina, is doing that cap is to quote unquote ensure that students within the state can get a chance to go to state institutions. That's holding the conversation for another day. But one thing people were telling us when we posted about it is, hey, like, there's other schools that got penalized too. And I was like, okay, whatever, because it's a little bit different when it comes to HBCUs. But I want to ask you this, because there's other state institutions in the state of Tennessee. So are those other institutions dealing with what Tennessee State has had to deal with having to validate the rise in enrollment?
No. So here's where we are. We have another land grant university. And so we'll talk about the PWI. They make it rain on them, just keeping it real. They don't have to worry about funding. They don't have to worry about if their enrollment goes up. They have the funds, and they have the infrastructure, and they have the dormitories. They have everything they need to house these students and fully educate these students without struggle. Then we have Tennessee State University, the other school. And it's almost treated like the stepchild within Tennessee. And so what we find is that, again, underfunded, question when our enrollment goes up, instead of how can we fund, how can we provide, Tennessee State asked for 12 dormitories, asked for lodging for 12 hotels. We received 5. And so when we think about when we have a need, is our need answered? Is our need taken seriously? Is our need heard? And so again, kind of to go back to your question, why do we need to challenge these statements? Because our students have needs, because our students need to be housed. And so Tennessee State, one of the cool things about Tennessee State, we had the large enrollment. The freshman class was 3,567 students this year. That's the largest first year students that we've had at Tennessee State University. And so instead of turning those students away, those who enrolled in Tennessee State, instead of turning them away and saying we don't have housing, we chose to advocate that they have housing. And so when you go to ask for that housing, then to not receive the full amount that you have asked for, again, that brings a question up. Are we treated as fairly as the other? And the answer is clearly no.
That's a clear and resounding no, because the thing that I have a problem with what's going on at Tennessee State, and also bringing in North Carolina A&T into the conversation, because both of these stories and these moments, really came to pass with at the same time. The thing that I don't understand is that it's good that a school is rising in enrollment. You're penalized when the school is rising in enrollment, and you're penalized when the school isn't rising in enrollment. And that's the part I don't understand, because in a higher education system in 2022 and 2023 and beyond, you should be encouraging that rise in enrollment, especially if it means that you're serving, the citizens of your state and creating an educated electorate. That's what you want, because that brings a surge of economic fulfillment into the states and the cities. You want that. So that's the part that I don't really understand. As an HBCU alumni, that's what frustrates me. So I want to ask this. How do the Tennessee State University alumni feel about this?
Yeah, it's hurtful because, first of all, we went to Tennessee State University with or without our $544 million. We went there, and we went there well. We went there, we produced just all types of success from Tennessee State University. And so it hurts when others don't see the value, that we experience, that we know that's there. But we also realize that if we don't speak up, and we're in this opportunity where we could receive our funding, there are other HBCUs who are also owed that funding that their lawmakers may not see the value as well. So it's hurtful, but it empowers us. You know, we could be discouraged, we could be disgruntled, but it's always empowered us. And so that's why this platform is great. That's why this is a wonderful opportunity to turn a negative into a positive, to speak of our greatness, to speak of the opportunity, to speak of how much greater. My grandmother always had a statement. She said, "You think you're so great, how about you add an ER and become greater?" That's what this funding could do. Tennessee State University is great, but with proper funding, we could be greater. And if we've already influenced this society in major ways, imagine the impact if we had the funding that we're owed.
Exactly. And, you know, I want to boil down to the specific points of what happened, because I know that, you know, with my generation, I graduated from Fort Valley in fall of 2019. I'm still young out here. I'm not an OG just yet, still young out here. One thing we look at is the process of why things happen and what happens when things happen, right? Yeah. So Dr. Glover was called to this hearing and had to basically testify and say, like, hey, this is the reason why, you know, Tennessee State's enrollment rose. Why was she even called? Like, why was it even a discussion? Because that's the part I think a lot of people are talking about, and that's what's even in my mind. Like, why is it even a discussion where it's like, hey, she has to go and testify to the fact that, hey, this is a good thing that enrollment is going up and we shouldn't be penalized or looked at crazy for it? Like, why does she even have to say that to the senators?
Yeah, so that's where we have to first look at value, the value that lawmakers in Tennessee see in Tennessee State University, that they would question it, that they would just be confused as to why this enrollment is happening, that they would be oblivious to all of the things that are happening in the world that make HBCUs more than just a cultural moment, but make them something that people want to make a part of their lives and their lifestyles and their families forever and ever. And so I think that the biggest part of this is that they underestimate, you know, when you look up out of the blue and you think about it's unexpected, okay? HBCUs, our success is unexpected. You know, when you look at out of the blue and you hear a statement like that, it means that you didn't see it coming. You had lower expectations for it. So what we see is that, again, lawmakers at times don't understand our story. They don't understand. If you don't understand my story, you don't understand my success, and you don't understand my struggles. And if you don't understand my success and you don't understand my struggles, you don't understand the needs of HBCUs. And so we have different needs than our PWIs. Why? Because a lot of our students come from first generation homes. A lot of our students, this is the first time away from their families. A lot of our students can't afford the education that they are embarked in. And so we understand at HBCUs that it takes a village, not just to raise a child, but it takes a village to support a college student, to support that student when they become an adult in the workforce. So that's what we understand at our HBCUs, that they may not understand within the lawmakers of when they're making those decisions and they're making those statements. They don't understand the full story.
That level of understanding is important, because that's why we have to be involved in the political process.
Absolutely.
Because when you have politicians that went to HBCUs or that are a part of our culture, they understand the importance of why HBCUs matter. They understand the importance of why Black programs matter. They understand the importance of choice. But when you don't have, you know, folks that look like us in the space, they can't advocate for our experience. Yeah. But the thing that really gets me is oftentimes, and, you know, we saw, you know, record numbers of young people voting, you know, in the midterm elections around the nation. One thing that I hear from a lot of folks is that their vote doesn't matter, and that they have no voice in the political process. So what is it that we can do? Even those of us, I'm in Georgia right now. Like, what can we do as a national HBCU community to, number one, help Tennessee State, and number two, ensure that other state-funded and land-grant institutions don't have to go through this?
One is we have to get more faces in these spaces. And, you know, what does that mean? We need to become lawmakers. We have to understand the political process and become a part of it, and not just be the ones voting, but be the ones voted on, so that we're at these tables and we're in these discussions. Because what I've always learned, if you're not at the table, you're usually not in the discussion, because usually the discussion is about the people who are sitting around the table and the ideas and the features that represent them. So we have to get ourselves at these tables. But also importantly, we have allies. And so I'm never going to believe that there aren't people who don't look like me, who aren't in the struggle and who aren't fighting for me. But I do have to equip them, and I have to have conversations with them. And so we have to write letters, we have to write emails, we have to tweet, we have to make videos, we have to get on these platforms, and we have to tell our stories, so that when those lawmakers go in those rooms, they're not the minority when they're advocating for HBCUs. They become a part of the majority that is celebrating and advocating for HBCUs.
So another question I want to ask you, and it goes off the question of what we can do to support Tennessee State and prevent this from happening to other HBCUs. But, what have the alumni of Tennessee State done? Because you're here right now, and, you're saying a lot of amazing things, and I see you advocating. So as a whole, what has the alumni base of Tennessee State University done to combat, just the negative stigma that, the state is putting on Tennessee State for a rise in enrollment?
First of all, it's understanding all the issues, because, we have alumni who have asked, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And so what we've had to do, we've had to educate alumni on the HBCU renaissance. How does this happen? There are a lot of people who didn't understand that when you employ a former football player as your head coach, who happened to be Eddie George and happened to be a fan favorite, there are going to be some students who want to come to Tennessee State University. When you have a band like the Aristocrat of Bands, so I followed the Aristocrat of Bands to the Rose Bowl, to the Lakers game, and to Disneyland just within the last year. And so when you are spreading that excellence out across the country, it gets people excited about the university. That's the entertainment side of things. So then when you start thinking about the education, we have Tennessee State University adding majors, adding more opportunities to pursue higher education degrees at Tennessee State University, unique ones, creative ones, some sponsored by corporations like Apple. We have funding that's coming from corporations like HCA and FedEx. So when you have those name brands respecting your university, what they say, it puts some respect on your name. And so you have a lot of people coming. So I think that what we had to do as an alumni base is, first of all, embrace the change. Growth is change. And so that means that some of the buildings that you love, they change, they expand, they move. Some of the information that you may have thought was one way when you were there, it changes as the school grows. So we've had to educate our alumni. And so that's what I challenge you all to do. One thing that we did, we sponsored something as the Alumni Association along with Dr. Glover and Representative Harold Love. We called it Far From Normal. And so throughout the whole process where the committee was searching for this funding, searching for the amount that they owed us, we had regular talks with the alumni to update them on the process, so that they were out there with clear information, so they weren't out there countering the information that was coming from Representative Love or from Dr. Glover. So I think that information and education is the best way for our alumni bases to be informed and empowered.
That is so important. And I appreciate you and the Tennessee State University alumni for doing all you can to combat this, because I believe that we do have a voice. And I think that it has to be important to affirm that, because we have a voice in this political system. Because if this is a democracy, we have to use our right as a democracy to speak truth to power. You know what I'm saying? And that's the part that I think we have to understand when we go into the voting booths, when we don't go in, is that there are HBCUs that are under the purview of the state. There's a bunch of them. You have so many HBCUs that are under the control of the state, and that specifically are land grants and has national ties to it. But at the same time, it's under the purview of the state, and a lot of that funding the state controls. So it's important who is at that table, whose hand is on the money, and if they actually are going to advocate for who we are and what we do and how we serve our communities. So I commend you all for what you're doing. And one last thing, I want to give you just the final word of what our audience needs to know about what's going on at Tennessee State and the battle with the state of Tennessee. And once again, what specifically we can do to help so we can blast that out and make it happen.
I appreciate that. And again, shout out to all the Tennessee State University Tigers. I could not miss this opportunity to just say how proud I am of all of the things that each of you are doing in the world. And today I represent the entire body. I represent Dr. Glover and the administrators, the alumni, and the students. And so one thing that I know, we were founded in 1912. And since 1912, amazing things have come from Tennessee State University. And so we want to keep that up. And we want to continue to recruit top students. One of the things that I can be proud about with this class, the largest freshman class, they have a GPA of average of 3.4. And so what that tells us is that most of them, we will have a large graduation rate. And that is something that is increasing. And so what we need is mentors for our students to keep them going, to keep them moving through the system. We need people to understand what the processes are in those lawmaker suites so that we can have our voices heard. Again, as I said earlier, writing letters, understanding what the cause is, understanding who the key decision makers are in your area. If you live in Tennessee, to understand the mentalities of your senators and the various lawmakers so that they can understand what our story is and tell that story. I just want to continue to advocate again for that $544 million. We don't want to stop. What did Michael Jackson say? Don't stop till you get enough. We can't stop until we get our money. Why? Because that money funds education, that money funds our residence halls, it funds other buildings, it funds labs, it allows us to do more research, it allows us to again impact the world in a greater way. So my thing is just let's keep talking about this, let's keep asking questions, let's keep making statements, let's keep writing letters, let's keep going on platforms like this, let's keep texting and tweeting, let's just get this out here. If TSU makes it, I actually live in New York City, and something that they say about New York City, if you make it here, you can make it anywhere. I've always felt that same way about Tennessee State University, that if you can make it at Tennessee State University, you can make it anywhere. But I say that about HBCUs as well. This is not just about Tennessee State University. If we be the first to walk through the door, to God be the glory. But the amazing thing about this is that if we walk through that door and keep that door open, other HBCUs will hopefully receive the funding that they're owed so that their schools can be funded as they were supposed to be funded.
I love it. And that's a powerful last statement. And once again, I want to implore our audience that's listening and watching to please support Tennessee State, share the message, get the word out, because this is an injustice. And we're fighting against an unjust system that penalizes us if we're successful and if we're not successful. Because if we weren't successful, it's going to be different conversations from senators such as Senator Todd Gardenshire that all the stuff to say about the rise in enrollment. If the enrollment wasn't rising, he'd be saying, well, why are we giving this institution all this money? So we can't do anything. So how about this? How about we continue to fight, we continue to vote, we make sure our voices are heard, and then whenever Mr. Gardenshire is up for re-election, if he's going to get re-elected, we got to let our voices be heard in Tennessee. We got to make sure that happens. Just saying, I'm just saying what needs to happen. But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for coming on, Charles. I appreciate you so much. And shout out to Tennessee State University. We're going to continue to fight for you. You're listening to HBCU Pulse Radio. We'll be right back.